I think that the best lens that anybody can own is the one that never makes you hesitate to pick up the camera, or the one that you can put in your bag on your camera and not have to worry or think about what you're taking for that day out. And this lens here, the 24-50G from Sony, over the last 3 months has earned itself a nickname. I call it my 90% lens because, well, it can do 90% of what I would ever need in photography. This video isn't just a lens review though. I will talk about this lens a little bit more later on, but I mainly wanted to talk about the fact that I feel like everybody should have their own 90% lens. Well, bonus points if you remember this location from my channel. Found this last winter, I think, if I remember correctly. Never visited it in the snow though. All the scouting I've done over the years for these locations, for the project that I'm doing, has finally paid off. Not finally paid off, but this is optimum, absolutely optimum. And it's mornings like this where, I mean, obviously I'm really happy to be taking photos, but I could take no photos and be really happy just because it's stunning. In terms of appreciating life, I think photography has to be one of the greatest hobbies in the world, as Jeremy Clarkson would put it. I actually think this is a really nice composition. It's a bit of a weird one, but I'm filling quite a lot of the left frame with this track that swings round and then framing the building between these two posts, which I think it's weird but like quite cool and interesting at the same time, and probably one of them ones that I'm not going to know if it fully works until I get back and look at it on the big screen. But I just think it's a bit different, a bit less obvious perhaps. So I've found that in times when I'm questioning my gear the most in terms of performance, or whether the gear that I've got is correct for me or not, is actually the times when I'm enjoying photography the least, because, well, I'm thinking about all the gear and perhaps money that I need to make the next purchase and stressing over that rather than focusing on, you know, my projects, getting out, improving and just having a fun time with photography. So I decided early last year that I wanted to try and almost completely abolish any thoughts about what lens goes on the front of my camera at any given time. I basically wanted to find a setup that was 90% perfect in order to, when I go out to do photography, the camera and the lens goes in the bag, job done, off we go. Decision fatigue prior to shooting was not the only reason that I wanted to find a setup like this. It's also because I wanted the smallest and lightest carry that would also still do pretty much everything I need for photography. So it had to be very, very capable, but at the same time minimize on space and weight, I guess, when I'm walking around, because I am ridiculously done with carrying a bag full of lenses around. I've done that in the past, and you know, if that's what you like to do, that's totally fine, but it's just not for me anymore. The less I carry, the longer I stay out, the further I'll walk, and to me that extra mile or 20 that I walk or longer that I stay out for is way more likely to result in more and better photos than an extra 2 or 3 lenses in my bag actually would. The problem was though that on that pursuit to find that perfect lens that I'd rarely have to take off my camera, I actually just ended up mounting about 6 or 7 lenses that I enjoyed all in their own right, and I probably could have kept all in their own right and used and had fun with all of them in different use cases and scenarios. And obviously gear is part of photography. It's fun. There's nothing wrong with wanting to use lots of different bits of gear, much like a car fanatic might drive or even own, if they can, a bunch of different cars. But I realized that by over analyzing it and thinking too much about the setup that I have, or the collection of lenses that I had, that it actually sent me backwards on my pursuit in just having something that I never have to think about and I can put in my bag, grab and go whenever I'm going out to do photography. So when I was opening my cupboard and looking at my lens collection or thinking about what would be the perfect lens for me to buy, I was actually just kind of stuck in a loop of what if scenarios. I was keeping all these lenses around instead of just focusing on the one that will get the job done pretty much all of the time for me, based on what ifs. What if I go somewhere and I need more than 50mm? What if I go somewhere and I need wider than, I don't know, 20? What if I go somewhere and I'm shooting long exposures, and in order to get enough light onto my sensor based on the shutter speed that I want, I actually need a 1.8 lens? These are all just what if scenarios. And so enter the 90% lens. It's 90% perfect for me and can do 90% of what I'll ever need for photography, unless my photography drastically changed or switched to something else, I guess. Also, in the 3 months that I've been using this absolutely non-stop, none of those what ifs have popped up once. Don't really know why I took that photo. That untouched road just looked, it's not untouched, is it? But there's no footprints going up it, and I thought that was quite appealing. I can't remember who it was, so I apologise if you're watching this video, but somebody commented on an older video of mine saying that the best item of gear they have is their flask, especially in cold winter days, because obviously when they come back, if your coffee's gone cold or your tea's gone cold in your flask, it's an absolute nightmare. Which reminded me, I needed a new flask, and one that's like a bit smaller as well, because it's typically only me that comes out on these photography trips. So yeah. My sister bought me one for Christmas, which I asked for. Doesn't get better than that. All right, I'm going to go see if I can get to a spot that I also scouted a while back, and hopefully conditions are similar over there. I've got dew all over my face. Let's go. When this lens was first announced, most people said that it was a bit of a weird lens. Like, who on earth would need this when there's already 24-70s on the market in abundance, and some absolutely fantastic ones as well? And that is very valid. It makes sense. You might as well just have the extra 20mm on the end of it for, you know, reassurance. But the thing is, this is lighter, smaller, and cheaper than most 24-70s, a whole lot smaller and lighter. It doesn't look like the smallest lens when you kind of see it, but it is actually quite small, and that's kind of why it was a home run for my 90% lens. And I want to clarify, not just because it was cheaper, because I was confident that I didn't need that extra 20mm. The lighter, smaller option was an absolute no-brainer, really. I always like to compare my iPhone for things when it comes to size. So this is a small iPhone, the iPhone 12. They're much bigger now, super old. But if we put that up to the lens, you can see actually that even the small iPhone, the iPhone 12, is a lot bigger than the lens. The build is typical for a G lens from Sony. Robust, solid, nice and smooth. It's got a focus lock button on the side, which can be customized, aperture ring, but honestly you could take away the aperture ring and the focus lock button and I'd still choose this over a G Master or a G that had those buttons. Cameras these days are so good at customization. There's so many dials on them. Even the A7C II, which is short of custom buttons in comparison to the A7 IV, you can configure your camera to not really need any buttons or rings or anything like that on the lens itself. Obviously they're nice to have. It's great that they're there. I utilize them from time to time, but yeah, I'd still pick this lens even if they were falling short. Quadruple bonus points today in this video if you also remember this location previously. Last time I was here, I said because of the shape of the building being quite boring, quite boxy and flat, no real like bits that are sticking up that make it interesting in terms of shape and stuff, that conditions had to play a role here in order to make this building more interesting and worthy of like a final image, I'd say. So I'm going to do my absolute best, hopefully, to get a good image of this building today. But first I'm just going to walk up here a little bit because there's a tree over there that I liked last time I was here as well, but it was just like way too bright and the tree just became very uninteresting in the conditions that I was in last time. But in this snow with the soft background and the snow that's on the tree, I think it looks really nice. Sun's currently right up there, so I don't want to shoot it this way and have loads of flare and ugly bits of bright sky over there. From here, we get a gap between the two trees, if you can even call that bit on the left a tree, but you know what I mean, we get a gap. And I think I can also just work that building in the background out of the frame. And this is too wide to not get that building out, but maybe the building's actually quite nice in the frame. So let's shoot one with the building in for giggles. Alright, I've changed my mind again. I'm being very indecisive today. I don't want to walk any further than this because I'll get footprints in the frame, and I don't really want footprints in the frame. But you see this mound of grass behind me here? That brings a third thing into the frame that's got like the same kind of tonal range as the tree against the snow. So we're using the odds, rule of odds. We've got 3 things in it. Makes it feel nice and balanced and spaced out nicely. I was going to walk in to show you this, but I'm just going to have to point because, like I say, I don't want to get footprints in. But we've got light hitting the front, then we've got a part of shadow, then we've got light swinging down there and shadow beneath the tree and light in the background. So we get this back and forth. Looks like it's shifting at the minute. So I'm going to go ahead and take a frame before what I say goes wrong. But for now, let's go down to the building and have get reacquainted, shall we say. Last time I was here, I somewhat settled on something like this for the composition of this building, because coming around from this side, we bring the doors and windows into play, which you can't really see from any other angle. That outhouse, I'm going to call it, there on the right hand side, kind of obstructs those windows and doors from over that side. So I like this here. Also got all this long grass and bits of dishevelled wall that come into the frame as well. And realistically, it's a pretty simple frame, isn't it? It's just taking into account the details that you do want, like the doors and windows. Doors and windows today as well, because we've got the snow on the roof, snow on the floor, snow on the walls. The black space that's cast within inside those from the shadows really pops against the snow. You know, if you were stood here and you really like this frame that I'm composing, you don't have to, but if you did, and you were thinking to yourself, yeah, but it's not complex enough, need like some crazy leading lines or some more obvious foreground detail or something ridiculous. You don't always. It can just be really simple. If you like it, you like it. Take the shot. Remember the lone tree from the other side? Call me obsessed, but I've just realised I can see it through this doorway, double doorway. I like this shot here. Last time I was here, sorry, again, I was really focused on trying to hide that little settlement farm type of thing in the background there behind the building because I didn't want it in it. But today I've decided, actually, who cares? Let's keep it in the background. And this open bit of snow here that runs through here with the 2 long grasses either side, I think creates a leading line of sorts. It's not so obvious that it's a straight up line on the road, like a road line. Getting delirious. But yeah, it does create that same kind of feeling. If this 24-50 is my 90% lens, you might be asking, well, what's the other 10% then? Is it a lens that allows you to go wider than 24? Is it a sharper lens? Is it a faster lens? No, I kind of reserve that 10% for a cheeky bit of experimentation, a cheeky bit of fun, you know. Like I say, if I do have the luxury to try different cameras, try different lenses, try different focal lengths, or if for whatever reason I decide today I'm going to go out with 1 prime, 140 prime, really limit myself, challenge myself, and just have a nice time. That's what that 10% is. Also, I often hear about photographers building out like an epic lens collection that covers all bases. I've also been asked a few times, like, hey Greg, I've got this lens, this lens, this lens. What else would you recommend I add to my collection so I'm ready for absolutely everything? But realistically, unless you're shooting a wedding at 9 AM, a safari at midday, and then doing some macro photography in the evening, do you really need to have that collection of lenses and be that ready? Readiness to me is just having the optimum ability to just go and create whenever you want and not have to think or compare prices or stress about saving money for a lens. Just get really tactical with your purchases and buy one that can do 90% of the work for you. And I should probably put a disclaimer in here and say that, you know, if you are somebody that does landscape stuff, intricate macro stuff, weddings, portraits, astro, then yeah, fair enough, you might need more than just one lens. But that doesn't mean you can't still have a 90% lens. I feel that's when you're going to be most focused on projects, the photos that you want to get, and getting better at photography, rather than going down these rabbit holes. There's nothing wrong with rabbit holes now and again, but helps you stay focused having a 90% lens. And that kind of goes for cameras as well. Hope you had a nice time watching this. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.